I'm Andras Jones, Rick Johnson from Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, and the host of Radio8Ball for Feral Audio, and you are listening to Elm Street Radio.
Okay, what is it tonight?
Hello, Elm Street Radio fans and audience. It's Sis Deandra here.
And Paige.
And welcome to this episode of Elm Street Radio. We got a pretty cool guest for you today, but before we get into that super awesome person, we have an announcement to make. We have a couple winners of our Elm Street Radio costume contest. So for anybody who maybe didn't know, we held a costume contest on our Elm Street Radio page. And we just had people submit some of their costumes. And there were a lot of amazing costumes. All of them were amazing costumes. Because if there's one thing about a Nightmare on Elm Street fans, it's certainly that we are dedicated to our costuming. And we don't just, pardon my French, but half-ass anything. We go full out. And there was a lot of great, entries. And so our winner, who will receive a full episode of Elm Street Radio, is Jim, and he was dressed as Freddy.
Yay.
Yay, Jim! And then also receiving 2 mini episodes, so split into halves, and then they get their put together, and then that becomes a full episode, are Kristen, who did Amanda Kruger, and...
Which was so good.
Yeah, and Brittany, who was Taryn, who I think she just kind of threw that thing together, which is impressive.
She's just so impressive in general.
She is.
But...
She just whips up something and she says, hey, I think I'm going to do this. And she goes through her closet, does her awesome makeup skills, and makes it look really, really cool. And if you guys want to take a look at those costumes as well as the rest of the entries, go to Elm Street Radio on Facebook, and you can take a look. But the meat of this episode is dedicated to somebody whom both Paige and I admire very much, and somebody who I have a crush on, and I'm sure a lot of people have a crush on, but that is Mr. Andras Jones, a.k.a. Rick. So, what are your thoughts on Rick as the Kristen Parker cosplayer whose boyfriend happens to be, Kristen's boyfriend is Rick. So what do you think about Rick, Paige?
I have a crush on him too. So I think that I love the character of Rick, and I'm still waiting for somebody to cosplay as Rick with me, because I think that would be amazing.
Do you think your boyfriend would do it?
Maybe. I can maybe convince him to do it, but I definitely think that there needs to be a Rick cosplayer out there. I know that the character is just loved by so many people, and I love the character of Rick. He's so funny. I know when we interviewed him for Fredheads, and he talked about the line, the "Hello, baby" line, I just was behind the camera, swooning. I'm getting to talk to Andras Jones, and he is saying the "Hello, baby" line to me. I love it. I love the character, and I can't wait to talk to him.
It's one of those moments that makes your heart flutter.
Yeah.
Well, without further ado, let's go into the Johnson garage, where I'm sure Andras is practicing his karate skills and probably listening to Anything by Dramarama.
Hello, baby. I love this. They think I'm dead, don't they? This is great. Hey, what's with the tears? I wouldn't leave you. Come on, don't cry. I'm here. It was a joke, a big joke to fool Freddy. Come on, smile for me.
No more daydreams.
Well, gotta go. Good night.
You know him as the pretty kick-ass brother of Alice Johnson, who has the motivational music to get you rearing and ready to go, whether it's kicking Freddy's butt, doing some martial arts in your garage, or just being awesome. We have Andras Jones with us, Rick Johnson from A Nightmare on Elm Street for the Dream Master. Welcome, Andras.
Hello, baby.
That was awesome.
How are you doing tonight, Andras?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm always hearing phantom commas or trying to. So when you said was my character, you saying my character was pretty kick-ass, or that it was pretty and kick-ass?
It's
Are you saying that Rick is pretty and kick-ass, or is pretty kick-ass?
Well,
What's the difference?
He could be both. You know,
I mean, looking back now, he's definitely a lot prettier than I currently am. So, yeah, to me, he looks very pretty.
He's extremely pretty,
a
but
little bit less kick-ass.
I would honestly argue that you're quite pretty right now. I mean,
You're very pretty. You are so pretty, Andras.
I have flowing dark locks, but I also have a mirror, so I know you're just being kind. But thank you.
Well, you certainly have a face for radio. I'm just kidding. But
I appreciate that.
Which, of course, you do because of Radio8Ball, which we will get into just a little bit later in the show. But my first question for you is and this might be a typical question, but in looking at the impact of your character now, what are some of the comments that you've heard from people that have kind of stood out about Rick? Because I've told you this before, but I had a huge crush on Rick. I still do. And I really like his character, and it's one of those heartbreaking moments of Nightmare 4, because there's all those great people in Nightmare 4. But, you know, it's really hard to see Rick go. So what are some of the things that you've heard from fans or from co-stars, or just a little bit of reflection on your character?
Well, I think that probably Rick, I mean, he resonates as he's the good brother and the good boyfriend. He's like, I think that like he's a good guy. I mean, he's a genuinely seems like a good person, and in the Nightmare universe, the world that's really a women's universe. He's pretty devoid of of toxic masculinity. He has a quality that I feel like speaks, like that character is aged well in a way that maybe some other characters that are a little bit more, I don't know, douchey, predatorial kind of seeming might not have. I'm not speaking of anyone in particular. I just mean in general with films of that era. You know, I got to add some sort of intellectualism to him with some of the ad libs that I was able to do with it. There was something about when we shot it, we didn't really have a full script. So I got to invest it with some of the things that I'm interested in, which was kind of fun and very unique. I didn't realize how unique it was at the time. He still falls into that thing, though, of not being someone who didn't listen. I think especially with all the stuff that's coming out in the news today about people reporting harassment and abuse, which I think, you know, Freddy Krueger is kind of is a real metaphor for. Like someone's coming and hurting these kids, and they're trying to tell people, and the grown-ups aren't believing them. I do feel a little bit bad that Rick still falls into that category of people who he didn't really listen when either of the women in his life who were being terrorized by this guy were telling him. You know, he still kind of treated them like they were crazy. So it's a mixed bag, but I think he did the best he could with what he had. So I think that's what it means for me, and I think that's why I think people have a really warm feeling about Rick when they come up to my table at cons, especially when I'm with Lisa, because then you really feel like that it's a brother and sister thing. I mean, I don't know what it is that made you have a crush on Rick Johnson. Was part of it that he seemed like he was like a safe person to like? Like he doesn't really have this bad boy, dangerous guy thing going.
You know, the thing about Rick is that there was that little element of danger through the fact that he was able to do karate and he's listening to really loud rock and roll in his garage while doing it. And so, but it's not really the bad boy in the typical sense, but he had the spiky hair. So there was a little bit of rough around the edges and he kind of had that sharp tongue. And so he somewhat fit the bad boy persona, but he really didn't. So it's not really fair to classify him as a bad boy. But Rick was, I really like it when people are funny. And so Rick had the humor. He was a guy that I felt like I could know. And, you know, I've said it before, but you're definitely very pretty. So you were not an eyesore to look at. But you just had this very, you know, I'll take care of you, you know, I'll stick up for you vibe about you. And it just seemed like somebody that I would want to be around and some characteristics that I would want in a significant other. So I had a big crush on Rick.
He was like the quintessential good guy, like the quintessential big brother, the friend that, you know, would always have your back. And I think that for a lot of girls, that is something that we like and that we're drawn to. You know, not everyone likes the bad guy and the one who's going to mistreat you. You know, for a lot of girls, it's the one who's going to make you laugh. And so I think that that's why he relates to a lot of us and why a lot of us, you know, had crushes on him and you growing up.
Do you think it's also a thing, like they say that a lot of time that women judge a guy by the women that he's with? And it's like, well, I mean, if Tuesday and Lisa, like, you know, really see this guy as a really great guy, then he must be a really great guy because we love these women, right? Is there?
Well, maybe
is that part of it?
I feel like
that for sure.
I feel like Paige is right. There's some truth in that, but as far as in the movie when I watch it, I don't necessarily see Rick as somebody who's super popular. So just knowing his personality, and I mean, yes, he has Kristen and he has Alice. But, you know, Alice was meek. Kristen was seemingly a little bit misunderstood. I felt like Rick was just somebody that maybe from the outside you really had to get to know because some of the people he hung around with, mostly maybe from association through Kristen, you know, you come in and you say those guys are a little bit spooky and so it might have been a little off-putting. I mean, Rick probably was popular in his own right because he was a likable, charismatic guy, but he didn't fit the stereotypical mold. So I don't know if I didn't really look at him and say, oh, I like him because he's popular. It didn't have anything to do with that. It really had to do with the personality of Rick and the fact that he was a mixture of this guy who is a little bit tough, a little bit misunderstood, but really kind-hearted, and probably a lot of people actually like him, but he isn't the stereotypical jock or anything. I mean, he's not Dan. And
he's definitely the most like relatable character of all the guy characters. He's the one who's probably the most relatable because everybody has that friend in their life, or everybody went to school with someone like Rick. And so it wasn't the unattainable jock who, you know, is great at this or the super nerdy guy. He was the every man's man, I guess. Like he was the one who just was normal and very real and had a lot of real qualities to him. And I think that that's why his character in general resonates with so many people. You know, we talked a little bit about you, and it's unreleased yet, but you talk about in Breadheads when we're talking about things, you talk about the impact that the fans have had on you, and how they come up to you and they tell you all these stories about how Rick just means so much to them. And I think you mentioned something about getting an email and somebody told you, I just want you to know that you're important to me. Like, your character has meant so much to me. And I think that speaks volumes of not only you, but the character that you portrayed.
Yeah. I mean, Robert, I don't know if you were at, you think you were probably at the one in Chicago.
Yeah, we were there.
Said that, yeah, he said that really nice. He was like saying how when he went back and watched it, he could see that Rick and my portrayal of him was sort of in the James Dean mold. And when you were describing him, I was thinking also of like the Lloyd Dobler character. And like there is this kind of character in film where there's the guy who we in the audience see as popular, but in his world, he is not like James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause is not seen as this popular, cool guy. He gets picked on, and he has all this trouble with the cool kids, But we in the audience get to see that. Oh no, that he's really the cool one. And then these outsiders like Natalie Wood and Sal Mineo, or in this case, Kristen and Alice, and I mean all the rest. I mean, it's a motley crew of weirdos in Nightmare 4, other than Dan. And you have this tough chick. You can just sort of see how each of them is going to get made fun of by the in groups, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Toy's character is a nerd. I'm sure, Brooke's character would get all kinds of shaming around not being, being tough instead of being lady, girly. Obviously, like the way you are described, the way that Alice and Kristen are outsiders. And then all of the earlier Nightmare kids, they got PTSD. They're out there. Only Dan seems like he's a sort of a stand-in for the cool kids. And
right.
I always thought it was interesting that Dan and Rick had a good relationship. It seemed like. But maybe that was just like when I think probably at the time we sort of thought of it as like they're kids who knew, like they were friends in elementary school. And so they don't run with the same crowd anymore, but they're still, they're still sort of connected in this real way that's sort of outside of the society of school. But
that's such a good way to put it. Like that really does sum it up really well. Is that they are the type that would have been friends in elementary school and just knew each other and then grew apart as they got older, aspects of their life, and then now they're in high school and here they are kind of dealing with the end of their world in a sense, because Freddy's come in and taken control on things. That's a really good way to put it.
And you mentioned not having much of a script. Sorry if I cut you off.
No.
But
That's good.
How were you able, because Rick, as we've been discussing, is so unique. How were you able to take what was available on paper that was available from what you had to piece it together to create this deep, well-rounded character who isn't a stereotype of something, but really is multidimensional?
Well, this is going to sound maybe a little full of myself after all this nice stuff we said about Rick, but really it just meant that I could invest the character with a lot more of myself. At the time, I didn't really see him as being too far from who I was, other than that he was a little bit cooler than I feel like I actually am. But that's it's this great thing when you're in films, like I've described it, like when you have to have a fight scene where your character is going to win the fight, and they throw someone big at you, and you just know that. I mean, that you're going to swing. It doesn't matter what you do, they're going to fall down. It's very easy to be cool in that way. Like, most people are going through their lives having insecurities that that character didn't have to have. He was never worried that his girlfriend was going to break up with him. He got to be confident in all the things that the film said he was confident in. But then I got to ad-lib a bunch, so I got to add my sense of humor into it. I got to make like fun cultural references that I think make him seem a little bit smarter. Like he has the little riff about Kafka. He has the whole 1950s Hello Baby reference that aren't, those weren't in the script. So I got to give him just things that I was interested in to say. And also at that time I was really deep in training as an actor. So I was on fire. I was ready. When I got that, I remember the first few days on that, I was just so excited to be acting. I mean, you can see it kind of in that the ludicrous run down the hall is like a perfect example of just like, so sort of how excited I was as a person to be on that film. And then luckily Rennie and Rachel and the rest of the crew, like the creative people were they saw something and they chose the cuts that express that. So, half of my performances, or a third of my performance is in the script, a third of it is what I did with it, and then a third of it is what they decided to keep. Like, I've had other films where I did a lot of improvising, but they might not have kept that. Whereas with this, I feel like every one of my ad-libs ends up in the film. Even if it's like off-screen dialogue, which, that's a fun thing for me. Just sort of like it's a snapshot of a time in my life where there's a lot of me in that role. But again, like I said, a cooler version of me.
I find that a lot of, when we've spoken to a lot of your co-stars, that they have also expressed their ability to insert parts of themselves into their roles. And in addition to having the ability to express yourself, you're quite well versed in a lot of classic Hollywood. So as you were becoming an actor and training, I mean, what were some of your biggest inspirations growing up, and even looking today, appreciating the art of acting? What are some of your I guess biggest biggest inspiring people, movies, moments, anything?
Well, I mean, I guess there were a few actors who I saw when I was probably like a freshman or sophomore in high school who sort of made me. I'd grown up watching lots and lots and lots and lots of movies, but there were a few performances that I saw that made me think that I wanted to be an actor. One was was James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause. Another was Dustin Hoffman in The Graduate. And another one was Jeffrey Combs in Reanimator, which I'm not really, again, I've said it in a lot of interviews, I'm not the biggest horror fan, but there was something he did. When I saw that performance, I was just I'd never seen anything like it. And I've had the chance to work with him since. And he is truly, he's one of the most special actors I've worked with. And just in terms of his talent and his creativity, he's so much. I feel like he's one of those guys who should be talked about. That he hasn't had the opportunities to do it, but if he had the opportunities in his career, and where he's had the opportunities, he belongs in the conversation of the high level people like Gary Oldman and people like that. Again, he's never had the opportunities to do that, but when he's had the opportunities, like him in The Frighteners, nobody could do that performance but him. To be able to be that over the top and also so grounded. I think those three were probably the big ones for me. I feel like there's one. Oh, and actually Michael J. Fox, because he sort of exploded onto the scene when I was in high school, and he was this short guy who didn't look that unlike me. Like we had similar type maybe, and he was like he's a short guy who talked really fast, and his shtick was that he was smart. And I just thought that seeing a young actor, be able to play smart instead of like a lot of young actors, like Matt Dillon he was good, but he always played dumb. A lot of young actors sort of played dumb or soulful, and Michael J. Fox was able to play smart. And I just always thought that was really, I don't know, at the time it really inspired me. And I guess I could kind of do a version of what he was doing in things when I went on auditions. So it was just a nice little kismet for me as busting into the business.
That's awesome. I want to talk about one of your like earlier roles in the 80s, and it's kind of become a little bit of like a cult role, but
I know where you're going with this.
Oh, well,
although this could be a descriptor of like almost every one of my films, but I think I know where you're going.
Is it the one with Good Morning Miss Bliss? That's
role
that I see. I didn't know if you knew I was going there.
Oh no, I did not think you were going there.
So I am a child of the 80s, and I remember watching Good Morning Miss Bliss and seeing Rick in an episode. And the episode dealt with bullying, and you played the bully, Deke. And it turns out like it's got this huge hidden message behind it. But that episode really sticks with a lot of your fans, a lot of Saved by the Bell fans, because as you know, Good Morning Miss Bliss went on to become Saved by the Bell. And that's one of the episodes that really sticks out to people because it dealt with kind of another real issue. And I just know that role, like you've played a lot of kind of important roles in the projects that you've been in. When you were doing that role, how was it for you? Did you know that was an important character, that you were speaking to some sort of subtext of America, that, here's this bully and he's not really a bully. He's kind of bullied himself because he was dyslexic.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when people ask me what the best acting I've ever done that I think that I'm most proud of, actually, I think that the acting I did in that was the best. When you shoot, mostly when I've shot stuff that's been on film, and so it's all, there isn't really the sense of crafting a performance. Whereas that was all shot in continuity, in front of a live audience, on stage. Actually, I don't think it was in front of a live audience, but we did it on stage and we shot it in continuity. And I was getting to work with Haley Mills and a young Dustin Diamond, who his talent was so, like, really was undeniable that this kid had to destroy good actors, but he was amazing. And so I had most of my scenes were with this incredibly talented young actor who was just bursting with, that nerdy charisma that I totally got. And the other was working with Haley Mills, who was just a classic actress who I had a huge amount of respect for. So a lot of times they say, if you're working with great people, it's easy to be great. At the same time, I didn't have this sense of like, oh, this is going to be a really important show. It seemed kind of dumb and lightweight, other than the people who were involved, I was very impressed with their talents. And I'm not surprised that they ultimately went on to have a successful show. But I had no sense at the time that it was going to be, with any of the things I've done, really, had the sense that it was going to be that important when we were doing it. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but
no, it is. That's perfect. That's awesome. I just knew that I wanted to bring that up with talking to you, because so many fans talk to you about the other roles that you have been in. And so I knew that I just had asked that question. It was something that I had never asked you when seeing you in person.
The thing is that the best stuff I've done, nobody has ever seen. I did this film with Jennifer Jason Leigh in like 1992, 91, maybe 90, 91 with her. And it was just basically we played leads opposite each other, and it was directed by the guy who went on to direct Secretary, and it's called The Prom. And that's really, like, I feel like a real movie, like a real film. And then I did one in Austria called April's Arrival, but that ended up just getting dubbed into German, so there isn't even a version out there with my voice on it. But those are both really sort of more like art pictures, which is more, I guess, where my own viewing leans. Although, the whole dream thing about Nightmare on Elm Street has been an incredible synchronicity in my life. I feel like if I hadn't been in Nightmare on Elm Street, who knows, I might have found my way to it because the themes are so rich for me.
You, and I'm going to rewind the conversation a little bit earlier. Now that we're back on the subject of Nightmare, and you mentioned that Nightmare really is a woman's like franchise, basically, and Rick is, within this heavily woman-centered franchise that has a lot of really strong women. Having spoken to you, what are your thoughts about the importance of A Nightmare on Elm Street on a lot of women? I mean, here Paige and I are, with our lives changed and going out and taking action to be a part of the Nightmare community as two women, and even you maybe speaking to some female fans out there. Not to disregard all the guys out there. You guys are important, certainly. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Andras.
Well, I mean, I have to say, probably you could tell me much more about that than I could tell you. I just know that, again, if you think that if Freddy is a metaphor for, really, I feel like even though he's a killer, I feel like he's a metaphor for sexual predators. He preys on the young. He comes to them when they're sleeping. None of the parents believe they're in some way complicit. The fact that this would happen, that Freddy is a precursor to finding out all the stuff we found out about the Catholic Church, and now a lot of the stuff that's coming out about just the nightmare that women suffer daily in the workplace and just in the world, and not being believed. And so I think that's the way Freddy preys on people, has that sexual predation thing that's different than other, screen killers. And I think that also just the fact that Wes Craven's genius placed him in the dream world, also gives, in the dream world, there's the possibility that even if for a moment or maybe sometimes longer, that women can overpower him, can fight back in a way that they can't in the real world, because in the dream world, maybe things aren't so much about physical strength. It's more about mental and spiritual and psychological strength. But it's odd because I kind of know how the sausage is made, and I think speaking of Nightmare on Elm Street as sausage, like Nightmare 4 was the most sausagey. So my own experience with doing it was not that the people who were creating it were particularly thoughtful about these themes. Now, I never got to work with Wes Craven, and I have to imagine that he was. And this is not necessarily to put down the director of Die Hard 2 and Cutthroat Island, and Ford Fairlane as being potentially not the most sensitive director to a woman's point of view, although I guess that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's like, I think there's a lot of projection that goes on, and I think that really does go to the genius of Wes Craven, is that he created something. I think about this a lot with Radio8Ball, like creating a new thing that you want other people to invest themselves in and take and run with, to try and to build something that is so good that even people who aren't very good can do it and it doesn't lose its essence. And again, I'm highly critical of people who I respect, so I this isn't meant to like be trashing anyone who worked on the films, and at the same time, I don't think anyone would say that Rennie Harlin is like I don't think Rennie Harlin would probably say that he's a director of the caliber of Wes Craven, and that's not an insult because Wes Craven was better than probably 95% of people who direct films, right. Professionally, good ones. You know, he's in a very rare category. So the fact that, you know, I'm also no Johnny Depp, so you know, fair's fair. What they did in that first film, they really nailed it.
To interject a little bit, I feel like your character, and I'm not just saying this because you're on our show, but I feel like your character had more depth than Johnny Depp's character of Glenn.
Yeah, me too.
I really do. I feel like your character had more depth, and you know, it is going back to what you're saying about Wes and how he created this film, and it really spawned these sequels, and sometimes with sequels and sometimes with next generation versions, things do get kind of watered down, and Rennie was excited to direct, you know, a Nightmare on Elm Street film, and you guys were making this film for the MTV generation, and here we are, you know, all these years later, we look back and we reflect on these things and really realize that it was of importance, and whether it was intended to be so important or not, it really does resonate with so many different people. And I think that, you know, it was such a good film that just speaks to everybody. And I think that a lot of that has to do with, fortunately, the writer's strike, because you guys did get to put your personalities in there, and you guys are likable and relatable, and it really got to be more authentic than just putting people on film to make a scary horror movie. You guys got to be authentically yourself and interject that into those characters. But I have to say, I do, as much as I love Glenn, I definitely think that Rick had way more depth than Glenn, and it definitely shows through on the film.
Well, there are so many things that rush through my head when you say that. I'll say the nice one, which is I got to stand on the shoulders of giants. Like, Glenn laid the groundwork. But the other part I would say is just, yeah, but you look at what, like, an actor always judges a film by what they got to do, what the next role it got them was. And Johnny made a pretty good, he's done pretty good for himself.
Yes.
And I love it. And yeah. I've been a Johnny Depp fan. Like, I was at the time, actually, he used to bug me in a way because I was just like, you know, I was young and competitive. But I think sometime after Edward Scissorhands, like, there was it wasn't Ed, maybe it was around Ed Wood, but there was something, and there was some point in there where he took a turn, and I was just, you couldn't deny that he is a very, 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 very special actor. And I know he's been having his troubles of late, but I'm a fan of what he has put onto film. He's done some great roles.
Definitely. His roles after Nightmare have been really well. I just meant the character of Glenn. I do like Johnny Depp. I think Johnny Depp is a great actor as well. And I personally connect more with some of the sequels characters. I love the original Nightmare. It's always going to stand up amazingly well. But for me, I tend to connect more with the characters of Dream Warriors and Dream Master. And I think it was because the characters were more complex and really showed a wider range of things. As to where, Nightmare had some complex characters with like Tina and stuff like that. But really it's centered around the four of them, and it's centered around Nancy. As to where the other films, 3 and 4, really brought in, I would say, a character or, several characters that everybody can relate to. Somebody's the nerd who has an asthma inhaler, somebody knows somebody who is a drug addict, or somebody knows somebody who was in a wheelchair, or, there's all those characters that everybody just connected with so much. And I think that's why 3 and 4 are honestly the fan favorites.
Well, I get a lot of grief from my Nightmare 4 family when I say this, but I'm definitely a fan of 3. If I was as a viewer, 3 is probably my favorite. Just because there's that nun, she's so good.
Yeah. Although my favorite is New Nightmare, honestly, because the more that people hate on it, I love it all the more, because I just am like, it breaks the mold. Don't just get away. It's awesome and everything. But no, I mean, I get it, 3, but 3 and 4 are awesome. I know a lot of people love 3, and there's a lot of great things about it. I could see why it's the fan favorite, but to echo off of Paige, I totally agree that, part 4 is extremely special with the relationships of the people. And being a huge Nancy fan, I think that Nancy would have definitely loved Rick had she had the pleasure of being around with him and seeing that he was a much better choice than Glenn. But
well, we always have a good time when we see each other at cons. So
yeah,
I always get a really good energetic hit off of Heather. She's a good person.
Yeah.
Did you guys get to work with each other on The Demolitionist when you were filming that, or did you guys not film together at all? Like,
not
you
at
didn't see
all.
each other on set at all? I know your character, spoiler alert, unfortunately dies.
Oh, but I'm out of that one really quick.
Right.
And my best scene got cut.
What?
What?
There's a scene. It was good and it was bad. This is kind of a fun story. So there is a scene written into it where my character was on an operating table, and Nicole Eggert was supposed to be having sex with my character. Like, we were supposed to be having sex, and then it turned into an operating table, and it was like a nightmare. And then all this blood starts coming out of my head, and you could tell, like, and I was like, oh, well, this is going to be interesting. Like, it's going to be an interesting, weird scene. And I got on set, and it was so clear that she had not approved of this totally gratuitous sex scene with her basically humping this guy, this guy in a coma.
Right.
That, like, she was basically treating me like I was doing it. She did not like me. She did not, and not because I was the instrument of the producers putting her in a position that she didn't want to be in. I understood. I basically, this is a very Rick thing. I totally got why she would not like to be put in the situation she was in, and I think I kind of helped her to tank the scene. Like, it's not like I took charge of the scene. I was like, okay, well, come on, let's just do it. I was like, yeah, this is pretty gross too. Don't worry, I'm gonna be, and basically, so it ended up being something that I'm sure they couldn't use because it was her not wanting to be there and me not wanting to put her in a position where she didn't want to be in, and then on top of it, I looked like a Q-tip, because I had a bandage on my head and I just had these black shorts around, I was pasty white. And, yeah, it was I love the idea of I love the idea of making a movie, like a short movie, about the making of that scene, because I think there are some really interesting dynamics going on. But the scene itself, I totally approve of them cutting. But still, I didn't get to have my love scene with Nicole Eggert, which would have been nice if it had been something she wanted to do.
Nicole Eggert. So you kind of just segued into another portion of something that I wanted to ask you. Have you ever dabbled in directing or thought about moving into directing films?
I don't know. There's so many people. It's so competitive, and so many people want to do it. I don't think I want to do it enough to edge somebody else out of the way. But there have been times when I've been put in a position where there was something I was working on that needed someone to go out and shoot stuff. And I feel pretty happy with, I love directing comedy. When I've had the chance to direct comedy and cut it, it's a blast. It's such a blast to work with funny people. I mean, I feel like I direct and produce and write and edit Radio8Ball.
Right.
But no, I love working with actors. It's the kind of thing where if I ever had the opportunity to do it, I would love it. And I also have enough respect for the craft, for real directors, like people, the Kubricks and the P.T. Andersons and people like that, to say that I don't think I'm not a director. But I could do it. It's like I am a songwriter, but you don't have to be a songwriter to write a song. Anyone can write a song. If you write a song every day for 25, 30 years, you might become a songwriter. But I feel like it's the same thing with directing. Like, I think you can direct. I could direct something, but I'm not a director.
Well, we'll see about that in the future. We hopefully will get a nice comedy directed by you, but you are very much a host for Radio8Ball, and I know I could describe what it is, but you can put it into words much better for those listening. So describe Radio8Ball. It's a very interesting concept that I happen to think is really wonderful, and I had the honor, thank you again for having me on.
You were on our Nightmare on Elm Street themed episode when we had John Easdale as a musical guest, and had Tuesday Night and Toy Newkirk and Brooke Thies and you and Jen Brown for Women in Caskets and a whole bunch of other people involved in it. So yeah, I'm tempted to hear you try and describe it. It's always funny to hear people try and describe it because it's actually a very simple thing, but it's a little bit hard to explain, but I'll try. Radio8Ball is a pop oracle. And what we do is we answer questions by picking songs at random and then interpreting them like musical tarot cards. And I've been doing this show for 20 years, and we've done it in lots of different incarnations. We've done it live on stage, on terrestrial radio, and now I'm doing it as a podcast. And every podcast features a musical guest who comes in with 8 songs. And over the course of one episode, we ask 8 questions, and the questions come from me and from the musical guest, and then from 6 invited guests. And those guests have included people from yourself to John C. Reilly and Patricia Arquette and Seth Green and Weird Al Yankovic and John Doe and Viggo Mortensen and Pamela Adlon and Tig Notaro. I could just keep dropping names. Well, not indefinitely, but the point is we've had a lot of really fun and exciting, cool guests. A lot of them were not like when Tig Notaro was on the show, she was not famous, barely famous at all. She had like a small part in in the Sarah Silverman show. She played Officer Tig. But since then, so it's fun when people have been on the show and then 5 or 10 years later, they're more like superstars than like working actors and stuff. But the whole thing is about synchronicity. So it's like Pamela Adlon will come on and she'll ask a question about how can she get the Christmas card that her kid made for Yoko Ono to Yoko Ono, and then we'll spin a wheel, and the musician who's the guest, in that case Lily Hayden, will play the song that's the answer, and then we talk about that. And the conversations are pretty unique. And if you like the musician, it's a great way to hang out with the musician in a way that is different than people just asking them all the same questions they always get. And if you like the celebrity guests, then it's interesting because instead of us asking them questions, they're asking questions to the universe. And then there's this whole synchronistic aspect of we release one every day, one of these questions every day. So it's almost like a little tarot reading for you. If you tune in every day, there's just a little, who knows what synchronicities might emerge from listening to the questions that's asked and seeing how maybe it relates to something in your own life. But I could describe it forever, and really, like I said, it's very simple actually, but it's a little bit complex in the description. The best thing to do is go check out radio8ball.com or look up, it's all one word, radio, the number 8 ball. We're on iTunes and Stitcher, and you can listen to the podcasts, and you can also at our website check out some of the video. And I highly recommend, if you like this podcast, you should definitely check out our Nightmare on Elm Street themed podcast, because we have John Easdale from Dramarama playing all the music, and actually Tuesday night duets with him on anything, and that's, I don't know, I thought that was pretty darn cool. So go check it out. I don't know, how's that?
That's awesome. I know that I was nervous coming on because I think my question was, I remember the song was incredible, but I think my question was something along the lines of about my work, because I work in an office right now, and sometimes I think that I'm around a lot of people I see the suits walking by, and all I want to do is just like shout out and do something utterly ridiculous. Like, people will wear conservative dress clothes, and I'll come in with like a red snakeskin top on, because and doing things like this, and doing being involved in just about anything I can get my hands on. I'm questioning whether or not I'm going to be there forever, because ultimately, like a lot of people, pretty much everybody, I assume, wants to have some kind of impact on the world. And I want to, and I'd love to be a creative. But at the same time, I do enjoy what I do. But the song was really interesting, incredible. And for anybody who's not really heard it, you should check it out and check out the lyrics. I'll read a couple for you right now. It starts out, "There's an angel in my kitchenette, smokes my brand of cigarettes, so we're compatible. And she can't live without her radio. She likes to sleep with it turned on. She says that she never sleeps alone." And it's a beautiful, poetic song about this girl and how incredible she is, and the simple pleasures in life, and that she's a part of it, and that it's incredible, and that, you just can't live without this one thing. And to me, it seemed like my interpretation was, I have these squares, essentially, and then I have these other incredible things that, realistically, I wouldn't be a part of the current job I have now were it not for the things like A Nightmare on Elm Street. And so it was a really interesting answer to get that song, because it's beautiful, and it really seemed to fit the kind of answer that I was hoping for. And the same is true for a lot of all of the song answers that come out with Radio 8-Ball.
Well, it's interesting. I say this on the show, and I've said it in a lot of interviews. My father was a dream psychologist, and his dream seminars informed Radio 8-Ball in ways that I wasn't even aware of when I was creating it. And in the same way that, like, when I got Nightmare on Elm Street, I didn't think, whoa, that's so weird. My dad's a dream psychologist. This is going to be important. And yet, it is so much. And the language of dreams, I think, is the language of synchronicity. And I feel like music is one of those music lives in the same way that Freddie's dream world lives. It lives somewhere in between waking consciousness and sleeping consciousness, which again puts it in the realm of synchronicity. And so I think it's like this really fun magic. Like it's like if people didn't know that gravity was the law, and you could do this magic trick where every time you threw something up in the air, it always landed on the ground, and people were like, "Oh my God, that's amazing! How does he do that?" And I feel like it's the same thing with Radio8Ball. The song always answers the question because that's the way our brains work, when not just that, like, we can find connections with anything, but that dreaming, synchronistic musical consciousness is never that far from, is actually in a weird way closer to the reality of the situation in which we're living. And these sort of learned and societal constructs that we live in are more illusory than that essential reality. And so when we play this game, we ask a question, we pick a song at random, and then we start talking about it. There are the amazing synchronicities that happen in the room that we're all aware of, but even more so when you pull back to a week or 2 weeks or 2 weeks or a month or a year or more later. I mean, when you go back and listen to your reading a year from now, Deandra, I'm pretty sure that there will be things that you'll recognize in it that you'll be like, wow, how could I have not noticed that it was so clearly telling me this? But that's because we're in it. But I guess my point is that it may seem miraculous in the room, but to me, when it's miraculous in the room, it's miraculous like the way that gravity is miraculous. But what to me is truly miraculous is what happens when we add time to the equation and are able to look back on it in the context of seeing how things actually turned out and see how much information can be gleaned from just the randomizing of a song and the stating of an intention around it.
Yeah, and I will definitely have to make a note in my calendar to listen to it in about a year, because, thinking back on it even now, rereading the lyrics in their entirety and thinking about my question, even just a few months later, I could definitely see how my perception changes just from little things here and there.
Well, time is certainly moving fast. It seems like it's moving faster these days. So we're all taking a lot more information on a daily basis, and I think that makes it seem like 2 months ago, not even 2 months ago. I guess just about 2 months ago seems like more than 2 months, but maybe that's just because I'm really busy right now.
Yeah. But so as we wrap up here, what are some things we can expect from Radio8Ball moving forward, and then also from you, for anybody that is out there and wants to continue following what you do?
Well, for me, right now it's all Radio8Ball. So, I mean, we're coming out with a daily podcast. I'm recording them in Los Angeles or Burbank, down in LA 1 week out of the month, doing that, and then the rest of the time I'm just hermited away in Olympia, cutting these together and putting them out, and always looking for musicians and potential guests. And I'd love the idea of Radio8Ball is we do this random crazy magic in a room, and then release it a month later. And the goal is not like, it's partly we hope it's entertaining for you, but that it really is something that we want the audience to sort of take and make their own and add their own meaning to. I've developed a Radio8Ball app Then if you're on Android, you can download it currently, and if you're on iTunes, you should be able to download it in January. And it's filled with all of the songs that ever were recorded in the history of Radio 8-Ball, which at this point is like 1,000 songs. And you can ask it a question, and it'll randomly generate an answer, which you can share or purchase or just listen to as many times as you want to. And they're all independent. Well, I mean, there are a few artists in there who are sort of more rock star types, like John Auer from the Posies, and John C. Reilly has a song in there. But for the most part, it's pretty indie folks, but all people who have been on the show. And if you happen to be a director who's inspired by Nightmare on Elm Street and you wanted to hire me as an actor, I'm always still game to play. But I also work with a lot of actors as well and work for a management company that works with actors. And so I work with a lot of horror film directors. I'm their horror guy, which is kind of funny because, I'm not a big horror guy. But I work with a lot of directors and actors who either are working in or want to work in that genre. And if you want to find out about my music, it's on Bandcamp under the band The Previous. And if you want to find my book, it's called Accidental Initiations, and it's available on Amazon from the Sync Book Press. And I don't know. I think that's probably. I don't do, as you can hear, I don't do that much. So.
Well,
I feel like you do a lot.
Yeah, especially with Radio 8-Ball. That's very time consuming. Continually putting something out is a lot of work that goes into it. So you're definitely doing a lot.
Well, I just hope that it is gobbled up. That's the main thing. I do this because I love it, but at the same time, if people follow along and listen, it definitely makes my day, because especially with Radio 8-Ball, it's designed to be something that's interactive. And I feel like I've invented this game that I'm trying to teach other people to play. But if I always have to be the one who's there in order for it to be played, then it's not a very good game. It's like if Abner Doubleday had to be at every baseball game. The idea is that I really want, especially nightmare people, to, if you're into dreams and you're into synchronicity, then I hope you'll be into Radio 8-Ball. And like I say, they're out every day. So go to iTunes right now and check it out.
Yeah,
I can't help it. I've been putting everything I have into it for so long, and finally we're with a network, Feral Audio, that gets what we're doing and respects it.
That's
and
awesome. Congratulations.
And so I want to share it.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
I think it's.
Go ahead, Paige.
Okay, I just was going to say, I think it's so great that, like, not only is that your passion and your craft, but you're doing it with purpose. Like, the purpose and meaning behind it is so much more than just hosting a radio show. You're hosting this show and creating this content that really is meaningful to people. Like Deandra asking a question about her life, then you play the music, and then she'll go back and listen to it. Like, there is nothing else on air right now that does that. And so kudos to you.
Oh, thank you. You know what? We need to have you on to ask a question, Paige.
I would love that. I definitely would, anytime.
Well, let's set it up. I'm serious. We should totally set that up. I'm going to be recording some episodes in December. So
perfect.
Yeah. And thanks a lot for having me on. We all love each other in the Nightmare family. And at the same time, when I see you interviewing other people, I have to admit, I got a little jealous. I deal with those feelings on my own. I didn't lash out at anyone but it's nice to be invited. I really appreciate it. And
of course.
And I'm sure I'll be seeing you both at the next con that is, speaking of being invited, the next con that I'm invited to. Oh, I should say that we're coming up on the 30th anniversary of Nightmare 4, and all of us Nightmare actors have been talking about how we can coordinate so as many of us as possible can be at all of the Nightmare 4 reunions that are going to be happening over the next year. And so we're looking forward to seeing all of you out there, not just the two of you, who of course we'll see because you're there more than we are, it seems like, but just all the fans who come out, because it really is an amazing thing like I said, it's an amazing thing to be included, and to be included in people's lives the way people invite Rick and the rest of the Nightmare brats, as Robert calls us, is fantastic to be included in people's lives this way.
Well, we are so glad that you came on the show, and thank you for your time and for your insight, and certainly in conjunction with what Paige said, for what you do with Radio 8-Ball, because it's a very poignant show with a lot of purpose. So kudos to you on all of your accomplishments, and thanks again for being on.
Thank you.
I love Andras. Love him.
So amazing. Such a good interview. He was just so good. I feel like anytime that I can just sit and listen to somebody who is so knowledgeable like him just talk, I'm constantly in awe of the people that we have on the show.
Yeah, me too. And I love hearing him talk about a lot of the classic actors and the classic films, and especially Radio 8-Ball, because I know that maybe a lot of people aren't fully familiar with it, but the concept, and when you mentioned it, that it's something that is meaningful and that people can be a part of and then go back and listen to it and maybe get a little extra nugget of information out about it, and the fact that he's putting so much effort into it, and awesome for him. I'm so happy that it is continuing to grow, but that he's just created something that is an interesting, unique concept, but also can really have a lasting impact on people who might not be able to find answers to questions that they've been maybe asking their friends or family, and their friends or family is like, I really don't know, but they have this song, and music is so powerful that you just get feelings from it, that it's so hard. I saw a quote once that said something along the lines of, I can't put what I'm thinking or feeling into words, so I'll let music do it for me. Something along those lines. And so I love it. And being on the show was really interesting, and I'm really excited for your episode. So you'll have to think about a question that you might ask, unless you have it already.
I don't know, that when he asked me that, instantly my brain went to the things that we're doing, and I just want everything to be successful. So I feel like my question would be is am I on the right path? Kind of similar to your question. I feel like your question was so great for you when you asked it, and it's kind of a question I feel like I would want to ask too. I feel like we all selfishly want to know, like, what if we're on the right path, or if what we're doing is right. And I think that might be something I might ask, or who knows, by then my question might change. But I love it. I love how you can tell that he really has the passion for it. Like it's his passion. It's his drive. And, I think it's such a great thing. And your episode when you were on was so good too. And I thought it was so cool that you got to be on with Dramarama, and it just was great. And
it made me laugh when he was asking me like who my favorite character was, and I said names, and he was like, oh yeah, and everybody else is here. I was like, what? No, I love everybody. That's not fair. I totally have a crush on Rick though. So, I mean, I'm sorry. I love everybody, but yeah, no, I have a thing for Rick, and it's not just because he's there, because he's offline now. But yeah, no, I love Rick.
Rick definitely was the one that I feel like we all had crushes on. Like he would, like a lot of people feel like the Joey character was, which Joey, don't get me wrong, Joey was
He
cute,
was
but
cutie.
he was quiet the whole time. But Rick was the guy that you knew if you were sitting at the lunch table with, you could just be smiling and laughing. And it shows that, you know, I thought it was so cool that Andras talked about how he got to put a lot of himself into the role. And so that makes it genuine. And I like that Andras has been that way too. Even just having conversations with him outside of Elm Street Radio, you know, we talk to him and he just is funny and charismatic and just such an overall good guy.
He really is. And he has a big heart from having spoken to him, and he is very philosophical, and that's part of the reason why I enjoy talking to him. And I forget what the phrase is, but like being attracted to intelligence, and I certainly think that came through in his in Rick, and that was a really interesting conversation, because sometimes when you think about a character and you think about, okay, you know, I like them, they're a great character, and then somebody asks you, well, why really? And then you're like, huh. And then you just start to think back into your brain about, you know, why do I really like this character? And was he a bad boy? He might have had those elements, but he wasn't really. And there's other stuff that, looking at the way he acts or he dresses or who he interacts with, you know, maybe a little bit of insight into this character and how that ties into Andras. And so for anybody out there who might be wondering what you could do, how many episodes you can carry on to have a show about A Nightmare on Elm Street, this is it right here. I mean, looking at those little things and saying, okay, well, what does that really mean? Because it's all about looking beyond the surface and analyzing. And some people maybe don't understand that and might think, well, you guys are really obsessed fans. But when you look back at it, it's more of it's like an intellectual discovery. And maybe it's like, you know, Radio8Ball, it has some element of depth to it that really maybe will open someone's eyes and say, you know, oh, I can do this. I never realized this before. That made me appreciate that so much more, and just inspire people. And so when you ask your question, maybe you'll get the answer that you deserve, Paige, for finding out what makes you happy in life, because you're a part of a lot of things that are really highlighting unspoken truths, or at least things that aren't always brought into light with Elm Street Radio here and with Fredheads. So speaking of, what's happening in the world of Fredheads?
So Fredheads is, that's a great little segue. Fredheads is, we're currently still in production. And right now we're just basically in the editing phase and the receiving the fan submissions phase. We opened submissions worldwide earlier this month, and we've gotten some really good fans that have shared their stories, and it's kind of a great, and I don't want to say overwhelming thing, but it's a very powerful thing to hear people's stories and hear how this franchise has really just changed their lives. You know, I've been reviewing a lot of our footage from different conventions and, you know, our second unit teams and stuff who are out there doing stuff and filming stuff and sending it to us. And it really is just kind of, this story is just unfolding. And I think it's going to be a powerful message to people. And so right now we're just looking forward to seeing all the fan footage that we're getting and the fan stories, and we want to hear more from the fans and really get their input and stuff, because this is what it's about. You know, this film is really about the fans. It's about them, it's about us, it's about everybody, and it's our story and how this franchise has just impacted us. And I think that if anyone is listening and questioning how we can continue to do so many episodes of Elm Street Radio, I mean, I think that's it right there in itself, is that it's never ending, because there are so many people that this has affected, and it's so important to get so many people's stories out there. And though I feel like we interview a lot of the Nightmare stars and stuff, we also interview people who this franchise has touched. I mean, listening to, your interview with Nathan and getting, the chance to hear Ashley Blackwell and Toy Newkirk's interview.
That was special. Yeah.
Those are the things that we're doing with, not only just Fredheads, but with Elm Street Radio. That's the importance of it. And that's carrying on this legacy and really, helping others and really bringing out like almost a new life in a sense to this franchise.
I couldn't agree more, Paige. And so if you guys want to check out more about Fredheads, head to at FredheadsDoc on Facebook, and also on Instagram and Twitter. And you'll also find there the information on how to submit your video and your story. And I really encourage you guys to. I actually know a couple of people who sent me a message and were like, Deandra, we're going to submit something. So I'm excited. I can't wait to hear about when those go through. And I will... we just, of course, had the announcement about the guests who won the costume contest, or rather the fans who are soon to be guests, and we're having their shows will be coming up soon, and we'll have to probably work them in among some A Nightmare on Elm Street 4 centered shows, which will be pretty cool. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I hope everyone is having a very holly jolly holiday season out there. Don't forget, it is sweater weather, and a Freddy Krueger sweater is completely acceptable, especially because it is red and green. But even more acceptable because it is Freddy Krueger, and horror is not just 1 month, it is a lifestyle, and Paige and I are living it.
Yes, we are.
Well, I hope all of you have a wonderful day, evening, whatever you're doing. And we will see you next time on Elm Street Radio.
Bye.